So we have Dr. Om Nalamasu from Applied Materials. I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves. So I'm at Sanmina Corporation, which is a local Silicon Valley company. We are in design and manufacturing, and I run corporate technology. So let's take a minute, starting with Om. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Om Nalamasu. I'm not Japanese if you're looking for a Japanese person. Nalamasu might sound Japanese. I'm with Applied Materials. I'm the CTO. I also head a ventures fund, which has got about 65 companies in the portfolio. Prior to this, I was vice chancellor at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and before that, I worked at Bell Labs for a long time.
Ajit Manocha. I was actually started my career in Bell Labs with Om. And from there, I moved on to Philips Semiconductors in Netherlands as a COO of the Philips Semiconductor. And after that, I was the CEO of Global Foundries and retired about 2 years ago. And now I'm busy with a startup with a very seasoned entrepreneur as a partner. Retired.
Retired.
Never tired. So Prakash Agarwal, I'm sure most of you know him. And another entrepreneur from India, Sanjeev Shirya. So three of us have started a venture in India called M2I International, stands for Making in India. So that's really the topic of this session, Make in India, but we are actually in a present tense, making in India. And of course, I'll tell more about this in a minute.
And I'm Pradeep Jena. I'm currently the secretary for Electronics and Information Technology of Odisha, an Eastern Indian state within India.
So I see that the hall is half empty, and since it's hardware, I guess that's the story, right? Software guys get all the interest, and there's only a few people interested in hardware. So anyway, let's make it as interesting as possible. So what ESDM stands for is Electronic System Design and Manufacturing. And as you know, Make in India is a big theme of the current government, and we'll talk about it in this. Yeah. Can you? All right. Does this thing still work? I just do it from the laptop. Okay. So first of all, what is a system, right? Electronic system has a lot of components in there. And when you think about it, it needs boards, assembly, cables, modules, storage, and so on and so forth, sheet metal. So people don't realize that if you're going to make a system in India, you've got to have everything else around it available in India as well, or at least access to it. So that is extremely important. Second thing is, when you build a system, this is, for example, a communications infrastructure system, there's a lot of subsystems that go into it. So you've got active, passive components, you've got blades, modules, you build the subsystem, and that becomes a full system. So again, we're talking about a full system build in India. So the first question comes up, can such complex systems be built in India to meet world standards? We are talking about a global standard, not just a local standard. Can we actually build that in India? And of course, the normal response, and especially in Silicon Valley, probably is that not really, you can't do this in India, right? And then why not? Well, here's all the problems, right? Where do you get the components from? What do you get a competitive supply chain in India? What about the skills, experience, the management team, issues with unions, labor? Then comes the whole infrastructure issue, right? Power, water, roads, freight, lots of things like that. And then finally, the whole bureaucracy, import duties, taxes, licenses. So when you put all this together, the normal reaction is that it's going to be very hard to build high technology, complex systems in India for world standards. Well, what I'm going to tell you here is, actually the answer is yes. You can build such complex systems, and Sanmina has actually done this in India, and I'm going to use some examples. And the message that I wanted to convey, and we'll talk about this in the panel, is that today's India, it is possible to build complex systems. Nothing is without pain, but it is certainly possible. So we set up an electronics plant back in 2008 to build base stations for India's cellular network. And our customer was Nokia Siemens. And after 8 years in India, today we have a world-class manufacturing facility. We have a product development center, and we have an IT application center. All of this in Chennai, and we've made significant investments. This is what the plant actually looks like. This is on a 100 acres plot in Chennai. And there's 2 buildings. There's 350,000 square feet. With all requirements, it is exactly or even better than some of the plants we have in other locations around the world. We have the latest equipment there. We have the latest IT systems with complete traceability of everything that we build, all the components, and so on. But one of the big challenges that we had, and by the way, we shipped base stations for all the 2G, 3G, LTE networks, and it was a tremendous ramp that we had to go through until we hit the roadblock of the telecom scam, and then the whole telecommunications business suffered from it. But one of the big needs for a manufacturing supply chain. So we had to localize the supply chain in India, and over a period of 6-7 years, we developed suppliers for packaging, for sheet metal cables, for die castings, for injection molding, special plating, silver plating of those enclosures, plastics and metal and so on and so forth. So we've actually got a supply chain in India today that can meet some of the requirements of a high-level assembly. And here is an example of the kind of products that we have built in this plant. These include base stations, servers, storage equipment, in-flight entertainment equipment, controllers for wind energy, and so on and so forth. So pretty complex equipment. And I just want to share this. This is brand new news from May 6th from the Times of Israel. This is an article that showed up in Israel. Israeli solar panel robot cleaners outsourced to India. Normally, you talk about outsourcing of IT services. This is a manufacturing hardcore product that Israel is outsourced to India, and our plant is actually in Chennai going to be manufacturing this. So that's the first message I want to get through. Second thing is, why is India today probably the most exciting growth story? I think you heard it. We feel that it's really what China was a few years ago. And India is projecting growth rates of 7, 9, 8, 10% for several years. And if you look at some of the numbers, today India is considered the 5th largest consumer durable goods market, the fastest growing electronics market, and the 3rd largest TV market. And Om is going to touch on some of the needs of this. And if you look at some of the recent headlines in India, about smartphones now, India just passed the US. It's the 2nd largest smartphone user community. 100 million cell phones will be built in India this year, and potentially going up to 500 next year. 4G launch, of course. Views about India, investment from China, Japan, SoftBank. And then, of course, the whole solar story, India's plans for 100 gigawatts by 2022, and now awards for nuclear reactors and the locomotives. So we've heard about Skill India, smart cities, Digital India, and so on, that Prime Minister Modi has announced, which all fits into the overall infrastructure piece of it. So let me kind of stop there just to say that when you look at electronics, this is a $1 trillion plus industry worldwide, and it's growing at about 5%. It's extremely important for India in terms of creating jobs, in terms of cutting the import bill, that electronics is core to this whole. And the ESDM infrastructure, when you say ESDM, India has a great pool of design firms, all the services companies like the TCSs, HCLs, Wipro, and so on. Today, India is also getting a whole range of manufacturing companies, like ourselves, Jabil, Flextronics, Foxconn, and some other smaller companies. So the infrastructure is developing, and as we know, there's over 300 R&D centers, design centers in India. So with that point, I think the message that I want to convey was that, yes, you can do electronics manufacturing in India to meet world standards. There's a growing market, so it is the right place to look. Let's now shift to, I'm going to start with Om. And Applied Materials has had some history in India, and it's the equipment business. Components, peripherals, displays, and so on are very important. There's been a lot of discussion about the semiconductor fab, which has gone nowhere, but there are other industries that are relevant here. So Om Could you comment on some of these other industries?
Yeah, so I'm going to maybe define a little bit more broadly on what semiconductor manufacturing is. So within that context, if you're looking at opportunities, there is certainly LED, there is certainly solar, as well as display industries. I think you have a slide there. Basically, each one of them has tremendous growth if you're looking at the CAGRs. So, for example, if you're looking at the display industry, it's going from somewhere around $10 billion to $30 billion over the next 5 years or so. But what's common among all of them is that bill of materials. So India is importing anywhere between 50 to 80% of the materials in going after these industries. Next slide. So each one has drivers, certain challenges associated with it, both with respect to manufacturing, market, or technology. Of course, it's a stoplight chart. Basically, green is good, yellow is challenging, and red, there are issues, basically. So let's go one by one. I won't talk much about electronics industry. I think a lot of people know here. If you're looking at solar, Sundar talked about India's aspirations to have 100 gigawatts by 2021 or 22. Last year, 2 gigawatts were installed. So total installed capacity is about 7 gigawatts. So there's plenty of opportunity there. So technology is relatively simple. India has the technology, and manufacturing, majority of the manufacturing is not done in India. In fact, much of it is imported. So technology risk is low, market risk is there because it's a globally competitive place. Similarly, if you're looking at LED, a lot of opportunity in India. There are about 750 million incandescent bulbs in India. They're going to be replaced. In 2015, India replaced 100-watt, so basically phased out 100-watt incandescent lamps. 2016, they're phasing out 60-watt bulbs, and in 2017, they're going to phase out 40-watt bulbs. So it costs roughly 400 rupees per bulb, and Indian government is subsidizing it and selling it 100. So certainly there's an opportunity in the LED. Display, market risk is low because India has a 36% import duty. Technology is there in India, and in fact, we have worked with a company, Moser Bayer, about 5 or 6 years ago in creating this ecosystem. At that time, we were actually making thin film solar, but the technology is identical. It's a Gen 8.5 system. They have basically manufactured this thing to nameplate capacity for a couple of years. So infrastructure exists in India, and there is a need if you're looking at the display fab. And very recently, TwinStar, a display company, which is a subsidiary of Vedanta Group, has announced a $10 billion investment in India, if you want to call it display fab, display manufacturing center. So there is certainly opportunity if you're looking at lighting, or if you're looking at solar, or if you're looking at display fabs.
So I think the next piece is the ecosystem.
Yeah, so even in the LCD, if you look at the bill of materials, 75% of the cost is panel. So if you're looking at what is being done today, you're only addressing the 20% of the value, and you're leaving 70% of the value on the table. So with LCD manufacturing presumably taking place in India, you might have an opportunity to address that.
Okay. So
these are the enablers. Basically, government is willing to give the incentives. Multiple times we talked about a startup culture emerging in India. Indians are certainly very entrepreneurial. And there are a whole lot of challenges if you especially want to create very, very big industries. We talk about infrastructure. India's R&D is less than 1% as a function of GDP, and labor. And the cost of money is a big issue, basically, if you're looking at solar. Indian cost of money is significantly higher than anywhere else in the world.
Okay, thanks, Om. We'll come back to the next point. So, Ajit, I think we've set the stage here. Ajit is spent all his career in semiconductor fabs, and he's taking a slightly left turn here. And I think he's got some very interesting things to share with us. Can you tell us what your future plans are with your colleagues?
Sure. Actually, that comment I get all the time that Mr. Fab guy, what are you doing with the ESDM? So when I retired from Global Foundries, I was getting on a few boards, and my partner Prakash, he called me up. He said, Ajit, it's time for us to contribute to India. And he said his vision is that we should set up an ESDM in India, and we'll partner with the Taiwanese ODM, which is in Taiwan, ESDM is called ODM, and we'll bring the manufacturing to India. And I thought about it, and I told some of my friends and families. They said, Ajit, are you crazy? India, what does India manufacture today? Nothing. They can't even manufacture or make the gods, key idols of gods. Even God is imported from India.
China.
And it really bothered me a lot. And that actually excited me also. I said, I think we should change the landscape of India. And I said, Prakash, yes, by all means, I'm with you. And of course, our third partner, who's already in India, making 12% of the SIM cards for the world in India, very successfully. And so we, three of us, spent a lot of time. We went to a lot of states and looked at what does it take to make electronic devices in India. First of all, why in India? Why not just let China do it? And really simple, there are a lot of numbers that people have talked about. Today, the world population is 7 billion. And 3 billion people are served by internet. And 90% of those 3 billion devices for 3 billion people come from China. So we can just let China serve the rest of the 4 billion or 5 billion people left. And already we have God from India, then we'll have to just learn Chinese language and speak Chinese only. I'm not ready for that. Anyway, so when I looked at with my partners what India has to offer, I was totally impressed and amazed that the huge potential of India that we are not exploiting. Now, in my case, I left India 42 years ago, so I was definitely ignorant about India, and I'm still ignorant to a large extent. So when we looked at the potential, we said it's not India versus China. It should be learn from the best of the best practices of China and do that in India. And after we spent a lot of time with Taiwan, and the Taiwanese cultural, business culture, as well as the social values, a lot more similar to India, especially from the democratic principles point of view. And there's most of the actually companies in China originated from Taiwan. A lot of people don't even know that Foxconn is a Taiwanese company, not a Chinese company, but millions of employees are in China. So when Foxconn goes to India, they say Chinese companies are coming to India to work with India. BS. It is the Taiwanese companies which are really the master of technology. So our vision about working with Taiwan is really working out very well. We have already signed an MOU with Odisha, a person sitting next to me, and we are so proud of all the facilities that they have offered us. Virtually, we can do anything we want to do in India, and Odisha was our top choice, and still is a top choice. Yes, please. And we narrowed down to only 2 or 3 states because we'll need more than one state. But there were states which we found a lot of difficulties, and I will probably talk about that in a minute if the time permits. But it is not just the talk. So we already have started a pilot with a $30 billion Taiwanese company as a partner with us. We're starting the pilot in Greater Noida. Actually, the production will start next month. So this Taiwanese company also wants to see how good we are in our words, in our commitment, in our deliveries. And from the time T=0, which was like only 6 months ago, we started in a rental big factory, and the production will start next month. We'll be producing roughly 6 million phones a year. Again, this is just a pilot, just to test out the system. And everything is going like a clockwork. So this is a great example to say that to Taiwan that we can do it in India, we're doing it in India, and once this project pilot project goes to mature stages, we'll start looking about the mega cluster, mega project, starting with Odisha as one of our top choice. And we're talking about, it's a total investment of about $500 million. And Sundar, you asked me about the fab. A fab, again, I will talk about fab some other time, but fab will cost $5 billion and probably create 10,000 jobs. Here, $500 million investment will create more than 120,000 jobs in less than 5 years. So that's what really it's all about, creating jobs and making products in India, for India, and export. That's why our company name M2I International stands for Making in India, for India and international market. So that's really it's all about.
Great message, Ajit. Thanks a lot. And I think this naturally flows into Odisha. We have heard a lot today from the Odisha government. And Pradeep, maybe you can add a few more comments on.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just supplement. Why India? In fact, the market that India offers is going to be very huge, with more than 1.4 billion population, and out of which 60% youth. And the aspiration that is growing up in India, that creates a huge market opportunity. And as per the reports available, by 2022, the demand for electronics products would be of $400 billion, and that is going to be the major foreign exchange outgoer for India. Right now it is petroleum, but it is going to just, electronics is going to overtake that. So issue is whether can India afford this sort of foreign exchange outflow. So for that thing, we need to manufacture in India for India. And while manufacturing for India, we must also think of manufacturing for the world. And in order to do that, the ecosystem that is required is being gradually made by both the central government as well as by the state governments. So as ultimately policies are made by the government of India, but the implementation takes place at the state level. And here is where the states play a very important role, and I am representing the Eastern Indian state of Odisha, and we are very keen to be associated with this major manufacturing initiative for two reasons. One is it creates a lot of employment for our youth. Second, it also helps us increasing our GDP. And in order to facilitate ESDM manufacturing from the state, we have, in the previous two sessions previous to this, my colleagues and our Honorable Minister was talking about what Odisha has done in last few years. So we have transformed the processes. We have simplified the way business is to take place. And we are one of the few states which is hungry for bringing investment and adding to the manufacturing sector in the country. And in the ESDM sector, particularly for the ESDM sector, we have three policies which we have brought in last less than 2 years. One is the industry policy resolution, which has already been discussed. To top it, we have an ICT policy, very proactive ICT policy. And the third one which we brought out after Ajit and Prakash had a discussion with us, that they said, okay, your two policies are there, but we need a little more, because that would make us more competitive and attractive. And therefore, we brought out a special incentive package for investors who are interested to come up with a little bigger investment to the state. So what are we offering? Government of India has a program where they give up to 25% of capital investment subsidy for ESDM sector. In our policy, we have added another 25%. We have topped up by 25%, which is the highest offered by any state. So up to 50% of the capital investment can come in the form of a subsidy, of course with a cap. That apart, we are offering a host of things: land at reasonable prices, reduced rentals. Then we also give incentive for recruitment from within the
Training.
state, then EPF, employees provident fund support, the training and capacity building support. All these things we are offering. And more importantly, this is a sector where two things are very important: uninterrupted power supply, quality power 24/7, and water. These are the two things which cannot be offered by many of the states. Maybe maximum 2 to 3 states can offer 24/7 power, and similarly any amount of quality water. Odisha is one among them. We offer electricity 24/7, quality electricity, we offer water, and we create a stable environment where it's very easy for doing business with the state.
Okay. So thank you, Pradeep. I think key messages there is the matching the center incentives so you can get up to 50% capex incentive. Water, power, which is very important for our industries. This is good. I think we're out of time, but I would like to open up and see if there's any questions someone has. And please make it very focused since we're out of time.
So this question is for the government of India. So you talked about the ecosystem, right? So there's a huge, government entity called Bharat Electronics and BHEL, Bharat Heavy Electronics. And if I remember, in the 90s, there is a fab in Chandigarh. So there is an ecosystem. Is there any plan to use that ecosystem? Thank you.
Okay, I can't talk on behalf of Government of India. I'm representing a state. But certainly things are changing, and even Government of India is changing. And with this Make in India, Design India, and Digital India, with these three initiatives, now the country is galvanized to accept changes, to accept suggestions to improve itself, to make it competitive. Regarding BHEL and BEL, these particular issues are not known to me.
Maybe Ajit or Om, you guys want to take a comment on this?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the fab in Chandigarh is operational. It's basically a 6-inch fab, and they meet some of the defense industry's unique needs in India.
Actually, again, I think there's a will by the government, will by the state, and will by the local authorities. I think at the time people used to say it's very difficult. Yes, still there are difficulties. But the will is there. I'm not worried about the ecosystem and all those things. I think government is willing to put all that together for us. I think it's up to us to really make it happen. And we are committed to make this happen, and we're going to make it work.
Good. Okay, we'll take one more. I know. Unfortunately, we were given 30 minutes. This is an important topic which deserves a lot more time, but we'll try to work within it.
Actually, sir, we are very honored to be in your company, and this should be right in the morning session. But anyhow, I'm glad. My name is Anand. I'm an investor. I invest in startups, and I've invested so far in 60 companies in the last 15 years. I've had about 15 exits. I've sold companies to Amgen and Pfizer for a valuation more than $1 billion. My question is very simple. When I look at your sector from an investment perspective, at a startup phase or at an early stage or mid-stage phase, and I have a portfolio company which actually we worked with Applied Materials, the return on investment is actually becoming extremely fragile and variable because of certain other external factors, be it because of the competition that's coming in from China, or be it because of tax issues that are actually implemented within the own country in India. Now, for an investor like us, what is your advice? Because I see you at the other end of the spectrum, but I also see myself as a very important part of creating value and building the ecosystem through startups. So what's your advice for us, especially because two things are required. One, return on investment is important, and there is also a shelf life of about 5 to 7 years that any fund basically can be within a particular startup. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so my view is that in an investment like ours, where we can do the state-of-the-art devices for India, and not just the smartphones. We're talking about smart devices, from smart meters to the health devices to the defense applications. And it has to be really not just a screwdriver assembly copycat. It has to be with innovation. So something centric for India or for other countries for export. If you don't have some value addition or value differentiation, you will not make it. Actually, what's happening in China? Actually, this morning there was a slide saying China is losing its shine. China is really missing on the innovation. India has to really have innovation in part of the, in association with manufacturing. In my view, manufacturing and innovation are like bread and butter. They go hand in hand with each other. So our objective is to make sure that innovation is part of the manufacturing. And if, so for investors like you, if you see this is going to create a value differentiation, please invest in those companies. So we'd like you to talk to us also.
Thank you, sir. It will be an honor to work with you. Thank you.
Maybe I can just make a comment.
Yes, sir.
There are plenty of design companies in India that are actually doing well. They are tapping into foundries like TSMC and UMC and other foundries and are fairly successful. I think India has been aspiring to build a fab for at least 15 years I can think of. It has been a difficult journey. I think at least in today's discussion, we are trying to basically expand the definition of that, like many other countries do. And if you begin to think about solar, where we are as a country, 7 gigawatts, with the opportunity to go to 100 gigawatts. And I think there are plenty of opportunities in that domain. Again, if India becomes a display industry, again, there would be opportunities there. So I think if you're looking at the ecosystems, there are areas of the ecosystems where entrepreneurs can come up with ideas and thrive.
Okay. So,
Sundar, if I may, just want to add one comment. I think the one thing which came up in the earlier sessions also, we need to do leapfrog, not just catch-up mode. India is coming from behind. We need to leapfrog. And one thing which we in M2I want to bring into this is the best practices in the world. Because we have a global experience of working with different countries and different country incentives, innovation, manufacturing, and also the best practices from experience. For example, in my case, I have been on Obama's committee supporting manufacturing jobs in America. And we did that with public-private partnership with about 13 different CEOs were involved in that committee for the last 5 years. And you can see the benefits in US, that unemployment we were pretty much bankrupt in 2008. Today, unemployment is the lowest in the last 40 years. All that knowledge has to be we have to bring in India as well. And for investors, please look into those kind of aspects.
So sorry, I've got to cut this off right now. It's running behind. Thank you for the panel, everyone here, and we can talk offline.